So please give our speaker your full attention, and certainly look to apply the information here to your municipalities. And now let's give a warm sumo welcome to Greg Hagelin.
Thank you. And thank you for joining this session this afternoon. We're going to talk about the benefits that cooperative purchasing brings to not only you as municipalities, but also to the premier vendors that choose to use this program with you. Great opportunity for you to create efficiencies in your public purchasing that are trade compliant. As my background explained, I've had experience on the governmental purchasing side. That's where my experience into the cooperative purchasing industry came from. Excuse me. I also have construction and development experience. And with that, I learned firsthand the value of having good equipment and the cost of having bad. That's why I get so passionate about my job and sharing this message. I got a fun job. I come out and share a great solution with either the manufacturers and dealers or the municipalities like today. So we're going to talk about cooperative purchasing, and that is a very broad category. But more specifically today, we're going to talk about programs that are offered to you at no cost, created by Sourcewell, which is a governmental, governmental agency based in central Minnesota, and how that ties in with the SUMA Advantage program. These contracts, these purchasing solutions, are a purchasing tool. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not going to turn your agencies upside down. It's not going to replace everything you've been doing. But it's another purchasing tool for your tool bag. And just like any tool, it's got to be used in the right situation. It's not going to be the end all for everything. You don't pull a crescent wrench to pound a nail. You can get the job done, but boy, it's painful for everybody, right? This is a purchasing tool that's not only for paper and pens, but it's also for heavy equipment. Ag tractors, mowing tractors, heavy trucks, landfill compactors, you name it. Three things I want to highlight about Sourcewell. First of all, Sourcewell is a governmental agency created by the state of Minnesota back in 1978 to serve other government agencies. So specifically with cooperative purchasing, their focus is to create efficiencies in public procurement. And you can tell from my accent, and I'll say process instead of process, that I'm not from Regina. I actually flew in from Nashville, Tennessee. So each of these solutions have gone through a rigorous competitive bid or tender process. And these are national, actually US and Canada, national prices passed to your local dealers to pass on to you. So you're able to work with your local dealers or distributors. You're not buying from somebody 1,000 miles away. It's just the special programming that is passed right to your local dealers. So it doesn't change anything there. Cooperative purchasing is authorized with laws that basically say what two government agencies can each do for themselves, one can do for the other. Government serving government, governments working with other government agencies, creating efficiencies. And we see that all over. It's not new. It's done in fire protection, wastewater management, animal control. And on my shuttle ride over this morning to this conference, there was a group of people all having the same shirts on. And I asked them about it. and they said they're promoting consolidated law enforcement. That's a cooperation of government agencies, sharing authorities and responsibilities. That's also done in purchasing. As an example, the SARM, the RMA in Alberta, and here, the SUMA Advantage programs are joint purchasing programs. I want to illustrate for you what I'm talking about. This, this purchasing tool. The traditional tender process has been around for decades, and it's not going away. It'll be here tomorrow as a great option for you if you choose to go down that path. But that process is painful for you. It's painful for your vendors. The timeline that process takes when you're out to buy a piece of equipment can be 6 months, 9 months. And oftentimes, the end result is not what you wanted. You identify your need. You meet with vendors to find out what are the possible solutions to fill that need. Then you spec out what you want. And in talking with fleet managers, I know most of what they're doing with the specs is speccing out what they don't want. So they get into very deep detail in that process. The next step is to write that RFP that you're going to advertise out on Sask tenders. At that time, you're committing a lot of soft cost and staff time to making that happen. And you might think, well, that's just, we just go through that process. Well, I learned recently that the Hillsborough County Purchasing Department, that's where Tampa is, Tampa, Florida. Hillsborough County, Florida, Purchasing Department charges the fleet department $18,000, and that's US dollars, every time the fleet asks them to go out to bid. Clearly, they had to justify that price to their board to be able to do that internal charge. The process that we're talking about does cost agencies a lot of money. So it is a lot of staff time and soft cost. Advertise that tender according to your requirements. You go through that tender opening process, and then you still don't know what you're going to get because you got to evaluate all those responses. Were they responsive? Did they meet spec? Did they take exception to the spec? If they did, is that still okay with the user department? That takes weeks. You award to the lowest responsive bidder. That may stir up all kinds of troubles. When you get through that, you finally can issue your PO, receive your equipment, and make your payment. Months through this process. But cooperative purchasing changes the game completely. When you buy through something like your SUMA Advantage, it brings you back in the purchase process to meeting with the vendors. This doesn't make the purchase for you. It just makes it efficient. You still need to meet with those vendors, talk to them, let them be your consultant to come up with the best solutions for your needs and your application. Once you've decided this is the vendor, this is the product that we need to best run our operation, don't take your purchase down this long, drawn-out, painful path. Months, where often you end up with inferior product, something you didn't want. Instead, go down the SUMA Advantage path to quicker and more controlled purchases, giving you the control of what you're buying. Leveraging the vendor partnership that you've grown to trust over the years, whichever vendor that is, if they're on the program. With this, you just get a quote, issue the PO, and buy the equipment. Simple, efficient, and in control. And you think, well, you know what? Maybe that's what they do in Tennessee, But up here we have rules, we have to go through the tender process. Not true. You can. And you do have laws. I'm not disputing that at all. But your laws say that your purchase has to be done through this process. It does not say that you have to do that process. That's the key factor here. This has already been done for you, on your behalf, by Sourcewell and the SUMA Advantage. SUMA did your advertising for you. They put it out on Sask tenders. The process has been done. I have to use some examples here. I've worked up here for about 5 or 6 years with these different associations, and most of the time I've worked with Caterpillar. So I'll use Caterpillar as the example, but this is just an example of the 150, something like that, different manufacturers that they have available. So it's very widespread, the solutions that you have. So in this situation, Sourcewell and SUMA went out to tender for heavy equipment. The manufacturers respond at the manufacturer level on behalf of the local dealers. Manufacturers like Caterpillar are awarded a contract allowing you and your local dealer to bridge over that painful part of the process that takes so much time and too often yields unfavorable results. You take control of your purchase and just close the purchase and get back to work of doing your business as a government agency. Questions on that? Because that's really the concept we're talking about.
So where does the concept of life cycle costing, like I think certain equipment based on how well it's operating and how long it lasts, is that taken into place then with SUMA Advantage?
Okay, good question. And just for the recording's sake, I'll repeat that question so it's recorded. He's asking about things like, or factors like life cycle costing. And does that play into, or is it taken into consideration with these awards? And the answer is absolutely yes. These solicitations, and we'll get into this in more detail, but they are best value solicitations. It is not strictly low price. Price plays a big factor. It's 40% weighted. But it is other factors like financial strength, dealer distribution, warranties, reputation in the industry. So it's bringing best value for the membership, not just low price. Okay? Great question. I hear this a lot, but we have to tender. The tender has already been done for you. And for each manufacturer, there will be, that is awarded a contract, there will be a landing page on Sourcewell's website, sourcewell-mn.gov. And I think you probably have a link or something on your site as well. But it brings you to this. This shows the contract, maturity date, the contract number, for each of these manufacturers that have an awarded contract. And there's some other information over there. If you click on contract documents, you'll get this hot links that are to the full procurement file. So all of the bidding steps and the documents created through those steps are there available for you to look at, to download, and create your procurement file in minutes rather than the months that it takes if you do that tender yourself. So it's all the same things, the contract forms, the contract acceptance and award between the agency and the manufacturer. Request for proposal is the bid document that was advertised on Sask tenders that all manufacturers had a chance to respond to. The proposal evaluation is basically the bid tab for the tender. even the board minutes, where the elected board of officials awarded the contract to the manufacturer of that is awarded the contract. So all of those things are the same steps you would take if you chose to do this yourself. Or you can take advantage of what SUMA has already done for you, and it's all right there. You don't have to duplicate that. I pulled this bid tab. Sourcewell calls it Form G, but it's basically the bid tab. And each RFP category will have this available. So whichever manufacturer you go in there and look at, you can find this for that solicitation. And this heavy equipment actually has 14 bidders that responded to the RFP. And to your question on the best value or life cycle costing, that's all figured in here. This is a matrix that shows the manufacturer that responded and the points that each of them received based on the categories on the left-hand side. So it's right out there for you to see how they were evaluated and what points each manufacturer got. And I hear a lot, well, we just can't do this. We have to get 3 bids. Well, Sourcewell and SUMA got 14. Is that enough? You have rules and laws to follow. And you're used to those rules about advertising and going through those steps and different thresholds to meet. I understand that, and I'm not disputing that. But your law, they are a part of your overall procurement code. They're not absolutes. None of it is absolutes. That's one way that you can be compliant. But there are other ways. There are exceptions to those tender requirements, such as emergency purchases. If you have a storm or a disaster and you need something to solve that, you're going to go buy what you need to buy to solve the problem, right? And you're not breaking the law. It's built into the code to allow you to do that under those circumstances. Sole sourcing, if there's only one manufacturer that's going to provide it, you don't have to go through that full tender process. You can do a sole source justification. That's another exception to the bidding rules. Using joint powers, cooperative purchasing, is another exception to that bidding requirement. All of the compliance, I won't pretend to be an expert on your laws, but this is trade compliant, and all of the information on that can be found on SUMA's website. Okay? It's important to understand with this, the bidding requirements or your tender process are parts of your laws, and the exceptions to that, allowing you to use cooperative purchasing, is also part of your procurement code. So both options exist at the same time. It isn't one or the other. And if you make a decision to use this on occasion, it doesn't lock you into this always. There are options that are out there that you can pick and choose from. When it makes sense, use it. If you have time and the ability, want to do a local tender, go ahead. So it isn't a one or the other. Okay? It is trade compliant with both the Canadian Free Trade Agreement that kicked in July 1st of 2017, and also the New West Partnership Trade Agreement, which has lower thresholds, 75,000, I believe. So this is trade compliant. So if you're hearing about that, a little concerned about it, this meets all, as Carl said earlier, this is your CYA. It is trade compliant. It's gone through all of that analysis. I've been doing this for 12 years, and all over US, and for the last 5 or 6 years in Western Canada. And I find very similar or very common purchasing myths. Things that people believe to be true, but really aren't. I hear quite often, we can't do this. We're required to tender. Well, in the States, I ask them, do you ever buy off state contract? Well, they say, well, sure, we buy our cop cars off that. I said, great. How'd you bid that? Well, we didn't bid it. We bought off state contract. I said, wait a minute, you told me you had to bid. And they realize they're already doing this. If you've bought off provincial contracts or piggybacked off of another agency's contract, you're using cooperative purchasing. I hear this too. No, we're required to advertise for 2 weeks, blah, blah, blah. We have to get 3 bids. I said, let's say, for instance, you went out to bid and you got 2 vendors to respond. What would you do? What would you do? The response I get is, well, we'd take the low bid. I said, well, wait a minute. You told me you had to have 3 bids. And they sit back and scratch their head a little bit. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. These are components of your statute, of your laws, but they are not absolutes. I also hear this, we buy on low bid. That's a safe answer. That's a politically correct answer. But when I look around at fleets, I see that's not true. I see Pierce fire trucks. Caterpillar has the highest market share in heavy equipment. That doesn't prove to me that they buy on low bid. They look for what makes sense for their agency. What's best value, to your point. Right? I also hear this, and mostly from elected officials like yourselves. We owe it to our tax base to buy low bid. Do you believe that? I don't. As a taxpayer, I say, baloney. Is that the way you handle your checkbook? When you're going to buy your next ag tractor or combine for your farm, are you going to look for the cheapest combine that you can call a combine? No. When you're going to buy your next pickup, do you go out there and look for the cheapest pickup you can find? Or do you consider things like dependability, resale value, fuel efficiencies, past reputation with the dealership, safety features? I think you'd say yes to all of those things. And why do you do that for yourselves with your checkbook? Because it makes prudent sense for your family and your situation. So why not carry that over into your agency? I would say your primary responsibility is best stewardship of the taxpayers' dollars. Would you agree? Cost is different than price. And I'm promoting stewardship, whichever brand that is, whichever product that is. A piece of paper still works the same, whether you bought it cheaper or not. But when you're talking equipment, there's a big difference in products. I had one fleet guy told me, I think it was a backhoe that they had just bought, and he had selected what he wanted, spec'd it that way. They went out to purchase. The purchasing agent ignored the specs, bought one that was $10,000 or $5,000 cheaper. Because they didn't understand specs. They didn't have to deal with it after the purchase. They thought they were doing the right thing for the agency because they got that backhoe $5,000 cheaper. The fleet guy said he immediately had to go out and spend $20,000 on a new diagnostic piece of equipment because of that oddball that was dumped in his fleet. So that purchasing agent didn't do the right thing. He or she didn't save that county $5,000. They cost the county $15,000 right off the bat. So you know what's the best, the most prudent purchase for whichever product, whichever brand. This allows you the control to make sure you get that at fair or fantastic pricing. As you go back and talk to your constituents or your counterparts or your administrators, it's very important how to present this to them. Please don't say, we heard about this program, Summa Advantage, with pre-negotiated prices. That word makes you uncomfortable, doesn't it? Negotiation, negotiated, are real uncomfortable words in the public space. These aren't negotiated. This was out for tender. The manufacturers responded, and they were awarded a contract. So these aren't negotiated. They're contract prices. Much different, isn't it? And this does not cut out the tender or eliminate the tender. That's kind of like what it may have felt like as I'm describing this, but it has already been done for you. So it does not eliminate the tender. It satisfies your requirements to tender. Big difference. That's the reality. It doesn't eliminate it. It doesn't circumvent it. It's already been done for you. Summa did the legwork. They did the heavy lifting for you if you choose to use the program. And again, it costs you nothing. Isn't that great? So you have a Summa Advantage program that's compliant with the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, or in simple terms, it's trade compliant. That's the key factor for you. These contract solutions are very broad. They are, when the manufacturers respond to these solutions, for instance, the heavy equipment contract. It was heavy equipment with related accessories, supplies, and services. It wasn't for a certain horsepower wheel loader and size bucket. It was heavy equipment, allowing the manufacturers to respond with all models, all features, and all options. The great thing for you, you don't have to try to match up, okay, this was bid in Texas, does that work for our application here? Everything's available. And also, when you sit down with that local rep, choose the features that you want and the options you want, they're all receiving the same discount as what the base model is. It's not the bait and switch where you get a low price on the base model and get soaked for the options. It's all built into the contract, so you get the same discount on the features and options as well. It's a great program that way. So, as an example, the heavy equipment, the Caterpillar contract, it's not only all the new models and features, but it's also things like work tools, either with the machine or separately, can be sold through the contract. Rentals can be done through the program. Used equipment. You may have the authority to buy used without going out to tender, but if you need to, this satisfies that requirement as well. Parts and service. Sourced goods, which are non-OEM accessories that you need to make that contract piece work for you. You can bundle it all into one. That was part of the solicitation, part of the RFP document that was advertised. And I'll use as an example, let's say you buy a skid steer and you need a trailer to haul it from place to place within the city. You can bundle that into one PO because you need that as an accessory to make the skid steer work in your application. That's all built into the language of this. So very, very flexible contract terms. The municipal leasing is an option. If you don't have the cash to buy it, you can incorporate municipal leasing with this. You're using the contract to satisfy your requirements to tender. The municipal leasing is simply a way to pay for it over time. So that can be coupled together. It's not one or the other. Trade-ins. You can, some may choose to liquidate their existing product themselves. If you want to do that, SUMA has Gov Deals as an online asset liquidation company that can be used through the program. You may have your own methods. If you want to just get done with it, you can actually trade it in on the new product and use it as a down payment toward the purchase of the new. So again, very flexible terms. Now these terms and conditions, additional features like that, will vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. So that's not an absolute on every one, just to give you a heads up on that. That depends on how the manufacturer responds. They will all have all their new product, but most of them will have all of these features. So these contracts, the way they are solicited, are very broad and give you a lot of flexibility and a lot of control, all within the bounds of this trade agreement. Questions on any of that? Yes?
Is there a process in place to ensure that you have received that pricing after you buy something?
Okay, so the question is there a process that can be done to verify that you're getting the correct pricing? Absolutely. You can reach out to either the SUMA people or reach out to the Sourcewell people to verify that your pricing does match that.
Only if you reach out, they're not checked, that the manufacturer doesn't have to send it anywhere when they price you.
What happens with this is the purchases that are made are reported back to the agency, Sourcewell, on quarterly basis. And that goes in, and they'll do some spot checking, but this is done all over. There's $4 billion worth of paper to heavy equipment that goes through this. So it's tough for them to really monitor every transaction. So it's most often that the agency that is making that purchase, if they want to verify it, they will reach out and get that pricing. So it's definitely not 100% that will do that. Some of them there already have that. But what should happen is the manufacturer or the local dealer will give you a quote that has the list price, shows the discount per the contract, whichever piece of equipment you're buying, so that you can see you're getting the proper discounting. If they just give you a price that says, here's your wheel loader at this price, off the SUMA Advantage contract, ask them for more detail, because they should be spelling that out. List price, discount, they can add in for freight and setup, things like that, pre-delivery inspection, and then give you your total. But you should be able to track that through and see where the prices are coming from. So, good question. Any others? Okay. So, cooperative purchasing as a whole provides you choice, which is something you deserve. It gives you the products you want, the ability to standardize your fleets for parts, for service, for training, for that vendor relationship. And the real advantage is that you avoid that low bid consequence that I know you've all dealt with. An inferior product, or the one I explained that instantly cost that agency $15,000 more. Any other questions?
Has there been thoughts about, doing something like that for, consultants for their hourly rates and things like that?
You want to talk? Yep.
Okay, so the question on that was, is there thoughts about doing that for consultants? Whose question was that? Yourself? Can you specify which consultants we're talking about?
I mean, just anything, if you wanna do any design or any engineering services for the municipality, they'll have their hourly rates.
We have 22 partners in engineering services right now signed up under 10 categories. So that's done for you. And you're able to contact any one of those engineering firms. We have contacts on our website to get their pricing, their rates, and whatnot through the Swim Advantage program. Further to your question regarding the pricing, Greg nailed it at the end of that answer. Recently, North Battleford had gone through a purchase like that, and you're going to come across this on occasion when you reach out to, whether it be CAT, in this case it was CAT and Volvo at the time, where you get the deer in the headlights. Sourcewell what? What is that about now? Swim Advantage who? They don't know sometimes. And it's not out of lack of trying to communicate this to these dealers at that level. It's just that when you appreciate the fact that it might be CAT US contacting every dealer in North America, it doesn't really work too well sometimes. But that information flowed through as soon as our friend in North Battleford actually reached out to a Sourcewell number. Within about an hour, we got a phone call. They got on it. Within a day, he had his purchase price, and he came back to us and said, wow, we saved $38,500. That's awesome. So he was able to tell right from the dealer level what that pricing was and what his savings were. And there's a resounding storyline like that. Jennifer Thompson tomorrow morning will likely talk about how she's been trying to budget for a 15-foot pull behind grader from Komatsu, so going through SMS as a dealer in Saskatchewan. For about 2-3 years, they've been trying to buy this. Now through the Sourcewell agreement, they've been able to shave that price down from about $32,000 to $21,000. Bang, it's in there. Just have to wait for the snow to melt to justify the purchase now. Yeah. Go ahead.
What about testing for decommissioned waste sites or?
Well, again, we have in our engineering, we have, I think it's approximately 11 or 12 that are based under the wastewater management capacity. So they would be able to facilitate that for you as well. Now, if you're talking about going in and having somebody more of a blue collar style work to go in and do testing, which I'm not familiar with, we can talk about that off-site because this would be something new to me. But if you're specifically looking for an engineering partner to satisfy that need, we've got those for you.
Well, like our regional landfill, we've got to do testing there twice a year. Plus all our decommission, we have got to get it tested and send it.
Yeah, and you're probably.
Engineers, we do it all the time.
Yeah, and you're probably familiar. We had that thing with the Ministry of Environment where we were able to set up with 10 municipalities who were lucky enough to get chosen to choose on that. We still have a bounty of engineering companies that are able to satisfy that need for you without having to go through the RFP process. So you just have to pick up the phone and get your quotes. It's the most simplistic way for you to do it, and it's going to cover your butt. And regardless if you spend $2 or $25 million, an RFP doesn't need to be done. And in fact, the optics of you running an RFP tells the partner that you're not going through the Swim Advantage program, that you're going on your own, and they're not going to give you that deal.
Carl, first point of contact, is it with Swim Advantage or is it with the local dealer to initiate?
Yeah, the first point of contact would specifically be on the website, and that would be with the dealer or manufacturer, however that partnership is set up. You, by all means, can contact either myself or Christy, who's new to our department. But yeah, you're right, Kim. That would be the first point of contact would be on the website, and it's typically with the dealer or manufacturer partner name, whoever that's going to be. Most recently, you're going to find Brandt is involved now, and we've got a contact that's coming out on our website about that with the John Deere construction equipment.
So back to what I was saying earlier, this is about creating efficiencies, so not to gum up the situation. They're there as a resource, but it really creates that efficiency. You're able to work with the dealerships and the sales reps that you work with. So that's your first point. If you talk to somebody that knows nothing about the SUMA Advantage, then it's best to get them involved. But go directly to your sales rep. They should know about it, and you can just work the deal.
And I was lucky enough to partake in this one earlier, and I made a mention to the group as well. I work for you. Christy works for you as procurement advisors. So if you've got a question, regardless of whether it's a Zoom Advantage related program or not, if it's a purchasing question, if you have one of those things in the back of your head that's gnawing at you, you can't sleep at night because you don't know if you screwed something up, give us a call. And we'd be happy to have that conversation with you. If you're looking for some documentation to get you through that difficult process, if there's an RFP that you're struggling with, if there's just anything at all procurement related, give us a call. We'd be more than happy to help you out with that. That's our job, quite frankly. We are. I answer to Carrie Ann Daniels, but you guys are truly our bosses.
Another thing you mentioned at the first session too was that the notice of planned procurement has already been done by SUMA for you, so that part is checked off the box also.
Yeah. I tend to try to work smarter, not harder, and I certainly don't want to push that off onto you guys. So forcing you to do 439 declarations of intent to participate in the program seemed completely a waste of time. So I talked to SAS Tenders about that and suggested that that's asinine and had that removed as a requirement, and I'm able to post for you guys on your behalf. So I do that every August 1, so you don't have to worry about that job anymore. That's me.
Makes sense, right?
It's really about keeping it simplistic, and you know the CYA factor is there. We're just trying to make this purchase as streamlined as possible. It's not circumventing, it's not avoiding, it's not pulling away the process, it's just doing it for you. And I mean, you're fully within your right to do it yourself. It's just hard to imagine that you're able to get the buying power of not only Saskatchewan or the Prairie provinces, but also the greater part of the United States as well through the Sourcewell program. It's a pretty big wheel, and we're able to get a lot better pricing because of that.
And so are your vendors. Your local dealers are getting special pricing because of this program. At least that's the concept. So they're still making money, but it's not on at your penalty. It's the manufacturers providing that extra discount to pass on to you. It streamlines it for them as well. It's just about building efficiencies. Okay. If you want my card, I have that up here, and it's GST, but it's not the tax. It's Government Solutions Team. You'll never forget that, right?
Certainly with this here, I was going to save this, for the closing, not going whatever. But with this here, I actually do have two questions.
Okay.
The first one being, certainly, you talked about this model being used in Minnesota.
Actually, the full U.S.
Oh, the full U.S.
Yeah.
Okay. So with this here, do you have any details as to how that has actually made a measurable, difference to municipalities? And let's say like the timelines of let's say uptake let's say to that actual program.
Sure. For timelines, you mean the time savings
Well, I mean,
The history of group
or the history?
yeah,
Well, Sourcewell was created by the state of Minnesota, first as a 5-county regional service co-op back in 1978. And that worked so well that in 1996, the state legislation changed to say, serve that 5-county area and agencies beyond, which opened it up really globally if they wanted to. So it really started pushing hard. When I first started there in 2008, I remember when it hit a mark of 250 million that went through the contracts. This last year was pushing 4 billion in just that timeline. So it has really exploded. Creating these efficiencies. Public agencies are always pushed to do more with less. Staffs are cut when retirements happen, they aren't replaced, and this gives them a great ability to still do their job, compliant with the statutes, and we're told it cuts out about 70% of the workload of a purchasing agent. It makes their job so much easier and more efficient. So And I've also seen stats in the States, it's 1 in 5 or even maybe 1 in 4 public purchases are done through some sort of cooperative purchasing. Just efficient way to get it done. That
Yeah,
answer the,
Yeah. And,
Okay.
Yeah, certainly, I mean, like, that certainly helps me out in terms of, like, it started off as, let's say, like that 5-state, or pardon, like that 5-county, and then
Yeah.
you kind of
Grew from there.
And then, let's say, eventually adopted, let's say, throughout the entire United States, and
Yeah.
and growing past.
and
that.
then the other timeline is, then RMA in Alberta teamed up, really similar organization, teamed up about 6 years ago, and that has expanded to SARM and SUMA and AMM in Manitoba, and actually all to the east as well. Everything but Quebec.
Yeah, very true. So I do have a second question.
Okay.
And that kind of thing. So I'd like to transition to this, because this is probably, like the one that I encountered the most. So as Northwest Region SUMA Director, I certainly went on a tour. I seen 30 municipalities within within 1 week, and certainly talking about the SUMA Advantage program with this here, probably the largest concern that I had, whether it was from CAOs or from elected officials, was the component of supporting local. So almost like let's say if I put it out, let's say to tender, and that going, and whatnot, rather than supporting that local business, certainly like we do have some struggling communities in terms of, towns and villages that, that see some declining population or certainly pressures on business. So what tools that, might you be able to give us, or let's say, contrast with your experience to, be able to, let's say, fight back those particular objections?
Okay, good question. And I do run into that type of objection or question time to time. And I think the answer really depends on the product. If you're talking about Staples office supply compared to a mom and pop shop that has some office supplies on a couple of counters, that's tough. That mom and pop shop is not going to be able to get many points if it's open for them to respond, it's fair and open competition, but they can't serve the entire US and Canada. So they wouldn't score very well in that evaluation. It's open to them, they had a chance, but practically speaking, they're never going to get a contract because they can't serve the rest of the membership. But, yes,
I'm going to contradict you there.
okay,
To answer your question, from a SUMA point, from a Saskatchewan point, when we go off for RFP, and on that tour that we did together, one of the questions came about road construction and the difficulties of getting road construction companies into the municipalities. Sask Highways comes along, and they don't seem to want to come and facilitate their communities. So we go off and we do an RFP on behalf of that. When we do an RFP and we post out, we go on the CAO Facebook, we'll put a posting on our Facebook, and we ask the question, if there is a company that you want to utilize in a SUMA Advantage program under this category, please let them know that this is being posted on SAS Tenders and get on it now. That is the most fair way that we can make sure that our local suppliers are being allowed to take part in it. There is no criteria that's set in SUMA Advantage programs. I'm not talking Sourcewell now, I'm talking SUMA Advantage. There's no criteria set that says you need to facilitate work within all 439 municipalities. So if you have a reach of 5, 10, I'm still willing to look at that, because in the end, our municipalities are looking to serve these people, and they are technically voters, and they want to make sure that they're not necessarily cutting their nose to spite their face. But the fact is, in Canadian Free Trade Agreement, you can't do a local buy. That's contrary to the trade agreement laws, but it doesn't mean that we cannot still support our local business, and we try our damnedest to do so. Okay?
but to wrap up what I was going to say is that most of this, what we're talking about, is equipment. And this does play into the local dealer. The local dealer is still who you're dealing with.
But you have to appreciate from our geography of where we're at, most of our communities are 1,000 people and don't have a local dealer like that.
Okay.
So we're talking really about supporting like the local mom and pop shops in different industries. So that's where his question was
Yeah.
coming from. It was a
Okay.
little unrelated.
Okay.
I have a moderator question here that's been posted to us. I just got to log back into the system because my phone went to sleep because I talked too long. Somebody in the crowd here stated or asked the question just to see if the technology is working. Can you explain the process that is followed after the decision is made that gets to my local supplier? So, I mean, if you're asking the question, if I can sort of paraphrase, I believe you're asking, what's the process once a local supplier has been approved, or?
Yeah, that was my question.
That's your question? So that's really what is, okay. So once the program is set, let's say we have 2, 3, 5, case of engineering, 22 program partners, the announcement will be, first of all, we'll set up our website, we'll set up our communication, and then we go out to the masses and we post it on a newsletter, we inform everybody and their dog, and we talk to, we're blue in the face, we have this new program and we want you guys all to know about it. Unfortunately, it takes about 70 of these conversations until this really sinks in. And it's no disrespect to you guys, it's just the way it is. I mean, you're busy, and you don't necessarily want to listen to me talk all the time because it gets kind of mundane and a monotone. But the reality is we work on behalf of our partners to market those to you guys so you're informed as best as we can to let you know, and that's through a multitude of different avenues. Again, Facebook, newsletter, face-to-face meetings. I'll be at UMass preaching this. I'll be at the Public Works Conference later this month preaching this. And we'll be going through this time and time again. And of course, I am accessible, and as is Christy, on any question of any program, existing or non. Love to hear any ideas. And that's how we build the Sioux Advantage programs.
So just to clarify that, Carl, the local salesman that comes to the door,
Yeah.
his knowledge of, because it doesn't always translate, right? So the hierarchy knows all about it.
Oh, yeah. Right, okay.
I can respond to that if you'd
Go
like.
for it. Yeah, please.
It'll vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. To your point, yes, it is a governmental person at the manufacturer that has put this RFP response together. And they're well informed of what it is because they responded to it. Then they're awarded a contract, and it's their task to get that word out to the masses. And they're just one small department within the manufacturer. So some of them do a better job communicating that message out than others do. And some sales reps are brand new. So even though the whole dealership knew about it, maybe they didn't. So it'll vary from one to the next. But it's really primarily the manufacturer's responsibility to get this information to the local dealerships so they're informed about it to come out and share it with you.
And
Ultimately, that's a responsibility, and some are better than others.
And Kim, like I said in the instance with Steve Brown in North Battleford, if there is a question and a manufacturer or distributor has a deer in the headlights thing, call me. Call Lisa, call Christy. We'll get on the phone with Suma or Sourcewell or whomever that might be, if it's directly through our program, and we'll talk to them and remind them that, hey, okay, and then they'll contact you back and say, sorry about that, here's your price.
And I would encourage you, if they don't bring it up to you, push it out to them. Give me a Sourcewell or a Suma Advantage price on this. And
Yeah.
they can do their homework if they're not aware of it. They can circle back with their sales manager and up the channel to learn about the program from their end of it, because they should be getting special pricing to make this whole thing work.
Question from the supplier's perspective. I actually ran into this a while ago where customers said they went to tender, and then they came to me and said, can you get us Sourcewell pricing? And it's out to tender. What happens in that?
Yeah, I don't like that. You
Yeah.
can't play
Because
both.
it puts us in an awkward
You can't play both fences. You can't be on both sides. Either you're going to take part in the Student Advantage program, or you're going to go rogue and do it yourself. You can't do both. So that's why I'm telling you, not you, but your buyers, your customers, that if in fact they want to take advantage of the Student Advantage program, they cannot post their RFP in SAS tenders.
That's kind of what I was asking. That's,
Cannot do it.
Don't you lose a bit? Like I always thought, as soon as you went to tender, you lost your discount.
They're no longer taking part in the Student Advantage program. They're on their own at that point. And I mean, I've talked at great length about compliancy. Probably one of my fails is I didn't talk about that. And I need to make sure that I'll own that. That's the new messaging that I'm talking to our CAOs about now, will be the fact that be careful when you RFP, because the optics are that you're no longer taking part in the Student Advantage programs.
But I'll speak on our supplier side too. Just because you didn't go to tender process doesn't mean you can't ask two manufacturers for a similar price.
I'm sorry?
You can ask different manufacturers.
Of course you can, but if you post on SAS tenders.
Yeah, that's what I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You have to go to
Right.
one
Yeah.
supplier.
Like that, you guys are all on our website. All your contact information's there. Each are categorized. So when you go on there, you'll see it. You can make your phone calls, send your emails, whatever you want to do. But if you post to SAS tenders, all bets are off.
And another point to make, there are multiple vendors on different categories. You can choose to get multiple prices. You don't have to. And if you do choose to get multiple prices, that doesn't necessarily force you to take the lowest price. This gives you the control to evaluate and figure out what's best for you.
Approximately how long does it take to get a new vendor listed on your program?
Well, there was 23 when I started on May 18th of 2018, and we've got 150 now. We talk about how RFPs can take upwards of like months, not 1 or 2 months, but like 4 to 5 months to run through. Last year, myself, now thank you, Christy, for joining, but myself, I did approximately 20 odd RFPs. So I was kind of juggling things with my feet and my hands at the same time. And at the same time, I also had to do one for the Ministry of Environment that had nothing to Student Advantage related. Had to do one for Ministry of Government Relations, which is not related to us. And those were a lot to do with engineers, so you know what that can be like. Not to mention the one that we did, which we had 29 responses, and some of those are 300 pages long. Hard to read. I was falling asleep like this lady is back there right now.
So you're saying in May of 18 you had a full head of hair when you started?
I had 3 hairs like Homer, and they've all jumped. They just said, "Screw you! I don't want to be here anymore. I'm done." Don't blame them. No, I love my job. You know what? And working with people like you, our staff is so much fun. Great group of people. But I haven't met a CAO that I haven't had fun with. You know, I love going to UMass just simply because of the fact we get a lot of, I would say, a little bit more, less shirt and tie, a lot more fun conversations. And the dialogue is a lot of open, honest conversations. And it's not painful to hear. I love hearing the negatives too, because that's what we learn from. So if you've got stuff to say, I've got a pretty thick skin, and I'm not going to be really overly defensive about it. I want to hear it. Whether there's a program that I completely missed the boat on, if there's something that you guys are looking for us to do, feel free. I mean, what Greg is saying, I echo. This is just a no-brainer. But
What about asset management software? You guys thought about going on for an RFP for that, so that we're doing things consistently across the province?
are you talking about Munisoft?
No, I'm talking about something to track capital assets.
Like Asset Works or
Yeah.
Faster?
We're looking at it right
Yeah.
now, and I think it's something, when I talk to other municipalities, they're in the same boat, we're, going down that next step, and it's nice that they all talk the same place.
Sourcewell has several of those, just so you know. I don't know what.
Yeah, and one thing you'll get to know, I think this might be the first time I've ever spoken with you. I'm not sure. One thing you'll get to know, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So as I stated probably earlier, there's a lot of stuff that you guys do on a day-to-day that I have no concept of. This is the first time I've heard that request, but now it's on the list. Christy and I will keep that as a focus, and when Shannon, who's also new as the new business development officer, when she goes out and has her conversations with you guys and comes back and we hear that resounding asset management software, it becomes a program.
What are the preferred?
What was that?
What are the preferred ones? What,
I like, ArcMap, Esri, stuff like that.
okay,
That's what I like, but I've used it a lot before.
okay.
But I know I've talked to others that have got a lot of, I'll say, advice from just different engineering groups. And sometimes it's a big cost than what they really spend, right? So that's where
Okay.
it costs a lot to convert your data.
I'm not familiar with that, so maybe we're not communicating. Are you talking fleet?
No, no,
Fleet
I'm talking
management?
about, data management, like for roads and underground.
Oh, okay.
asset
I'm not
management,
familiar with that.
nothing to do.
Okay, okay.
See, the closest I got to that was we hired on about, well, within the engineering, there's about 12 asset management engineers. So that's an option, but yeah, I hear you.
Which is being forced on us by the federal government, that's where this all come from. So we're all trying to come up with an asset management plan. Some municipalities are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, some are getting grants, some are, it's all over the map, is what I'm trying to say.
So there's a lot of requirements, true enough, there's a lot of requirements, and if you're spending a lot of money, it needs to be value for money, because people are just spending money for the sake of spending money because it's a requirement, without understanding what they're spending money on.
Right, and like I said, this stuff that you guys are saying right now, it's invaluable to me. I mean, some people may be going to sleep, but this is the stuff that perks me up and goes, what's that now? So honestly, this is a program in the making. It's just, I need to hear some more. Thank you for joining in on that. I just need to hear a few more municipalities say, yeah, this is something we really would like to see. We'll go out and do the program for you.
I may be
And-
way
or
off,
we
I may
can-
be way off base, but I'm wondering if you can pool that together, and maybe you own the software with multiple
Yeah, I'm not,
authority- I
I
don't know.
don't control the purse strings, so.
But rather than each one spend $100,000, pool that together and put some efficiencies into it. I don't know what the software distributor would do, but
Yeah, I mean, all options are open, but at this
Yeah.
time, it's not even there yet, so
yep,
it's options.
great dialogue.
All right, well, if I don't hear any more questions, Greg, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. Yeah, and you know, with this here, we certainly, yeah, let's round of applause. Whatever. You know, certainly with this here, like you definitely covered a lot of ground today. So here's 6 things that I have in terms of takeaways from your presentation. First things first, joint power laws provide us the opportunity for the government, you know, let's say cooperation. I think that was the first thing. Second thing is that, you know, certainly like there's a lot of advantages because we can avoid the traditional timelines, which are costly and certainly time consuming. And this model is certainly, you know, certainly cooperative and very responsive. So, so I think you touched on that quite well. Another thing is that as municipal elected officials and even CAOs with this year, we have the stewardship of tax dollars. So we are trying to go out and we are trying to get the best deal for our dollars. So whether that's buy local, whether it's this program here and whatever, that's exactly what it is that we're trying to do. So thank you for that. Fourth thing is that, you know, certainly this system teams a buyer with a seller. And the seller program is already there. We just have to be that willing buyer to turn around and say, you know what? We're looking for the outcomes based, you know, and that kind of thing in terms of satisfying the needs that we have as a municipality. So therefore, we're going to, you know, state what those outcomes are, and we're going to give it to the Summa Advantage program, and we're going to see what comes back from it. So I think that was a very powerful message, you know, by the time that that's calculated. So I think that was great. Another thing is that obviously this does satisfy all of the RFP requirements and is trade compliant. So another very important part. And the sixth thing is that you touched on municipal leasing options. And, you know, certainly, you know, for my role, you know, and that whenever that's something that my municipality doesn't really talk a lot about. But I think that that's, you know, definitely something there that, you know, that was worth highlighting. So hats off. Thank you very much for this presentation. It was a learning experience for all of us. All All right, well, I'd like to thank all of the delegates for joining us today. Remember that these presentations will be available on the SUMA's YouTube channel later on this month. And for those of you attending SUMA Assure, it starts at 4:40 in meeting room number 2. Thank you guys all very much for attending.